Watch what I'm going to show you here. Because Japan has just hit the United States where it hurts the most, in its debt, in its pocket. We all know that the United States is one of the most indebted countries in the world. Most indebted countries. But we seldom sit down and ask to whom it owes the debt. We have explained that when the United States wants to get into debt, because there is not enough money to go around, well then, instead of credit cards like you and me, what the United States does is issue debt through Treasury bonds. Who buys all those Treasury bonds? Well, the number one country that buys Treasury bonds and the one that has the most accumulated is Japan. It used to be China, now it is Japan. Japan is now disposing of its Treasury bonds, getting rid of all those Treasury bonds, and it's hitting Japan and is hitting Donald Trump hard, not with missiles, not with speeches, but with his debt. Its debt, while Trump remains obsessed, by the way, with punishing his allies, Japan, along with his most indebted allies, punishingly imposes preposterous tariffs onto him. The United States loses with Japan, and Japan is the one that lends it money. Well, Japan is already executing precisely this financial revenge of the highest caliber. The city of Tokyo managed to sell a staggering amount of 30 billion worth of US debt, resulting in a total of 1,025. However, due to this action, it is now limited to a mere caution. This represents the current state of pausing and waiting before progressing further. It's the first shot, because when your second largest creditor decides to stop financing your economy, then what is coming is not an adjustment. When the country that is owed the most by the US decides that it no longer owes the most and wants to collect, then it transitions into a state of emergency. And this, my friends, is not just a simple tantrum. This is already part of a much bigger strategy where it is being done, as we say in Mexico, in Grudo a la Tola Donald Trump is being done. Japan is already moving its factories out of the United States right now. Toyota, Nissan, all of them are moving their production to, where. And that is bothering Donald Trump a lot. Just look at the articles that have been circulating in the last few hours in the US media, precisely because they talk about Japan moving its production to Mexico and Asia, and this is bothering him a lot. The US media is talking about the fact that Japan is going to issue an appropriate retaliation in response to the sanctions that are also being imposed on them. There you can see more reactions from Economic Times, The Washington Post. What is triggering all of this is the auto tariffs that the US is putting. The US is putting in place to hurt Japan, which is the country to which Washington owes the most money. And well, Japan says very easily, you don't want my cars. You don't want my jobs because of your nationalist plan. I will take them to Mexico and Asia. And to Asia, I think what Trump didn't see coming is that all this relocation that Japan is doing today, the outsourcing of jobs is not only resulting in job loss for many Americans, but it is also hindering technological investment significantly. So, instead of protecting the US economy, what Donald Trump is curiously achieving is that Japanese innovation will go to Mexico, it will go to Asia and for us. To Asia and for us, I repeat, for us to improve. This fact no longer makes sense in the US, even for its own trading partners who see what good it does them if something is made in the US, if it is very expensive and no one will buy it. And if nobody buys it, then it is not manufactured. And the most serious thing is that we are not even seeing the beginning of the great coup that Japan is preparing. This was just an initial touch. Japan is currently openly questioning its reliance on the US dollar, prompting the nation to ponder the rationale behind its significant stash of dollars. I have this whole pile of Treasury bonds. I've been lending money to the US for years and it never pays me back. Well, it's time to cash in, particularly when there's not even a single expression of gratitude. And the US is not only losing a partner in Japan, beware that Japan, I repeat. Look at Donald Trump can say with so-and-so and Perengano, I lose money here and there, that why don't I sell the same thing I buy? But with Japan, Japan is the country to which Japan owes the most money, and it's already losing because of backing that sustains the very fragile financial hegemony of the United States. It's the beginning of the end, folks. This is a fracture. that is already going to drag on with South Korea, India, and the European Union, all because of a policy that does not protect anything. Just imagine before the dollar was backed by oil, and Saudi Arabia turns its back on it and says, no more with me, don't count on me anymore. That oil is over, I will sell my oil in any currency. Before that, it was backed by gold, but they ran out of it. Then it was backed by oil, which was not even theirs, but that of Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates. And they say, no more with me, you can't count on me. Then they say it was backed by debt, and now Japan, which is the one that owes the most, says, no more with me, you can't count on me either, I'm already shocked by you. It is not just Japan. Japan is leading a very dangerous movement for Donald Trump and the United States from Tokyo. Look at the detonators correspond to the matters of tariffs imposed on Japanese cars, as Japan ranks among the leading car manufacturers globally. And so it is a blow to a partner to which it owes a lot of money. It puts 25% tariffs on auto parts, tariffs on auto parts coming from Japan and from all over the world, and from all over the world was to benefit his billionaire friend Elon Musk and to screw the US industries. But he didn't notice that it also happened. He didn't notice that he was also scraping by the landlord of the USA. Just look at the data of the Japanese Automobile Manufacturers Association. Just this disagreement. Donald Trump's disagreement has shot up the prices of many Japanese cars, for example, the Corolla Pua, the Accord, the If. Remember that Honda is Japanese, for example. And then as these cars become more expensive, they become less competitive with brands like Ford, General Motors, and Tesla. So this is the game that Donald Trump wants to play. To put on the table, according to this report, sales of Japanese cars in the US market fell by 7% in the first quarter of 2025. This downturn serves as a warning sign, suggesting that more challenges lie ahead. Its magnitude is just starting to manifest itself, a mere glimpse of the forthcoming troubles on the horizon. Because while this is happening in Detroit, they were hailing this as a great success of Trump's protectionist measures, as if making consumer prices soar was something to cheer about. They seemed oblivious to the fact that now all cars in the US will become significantly pricier without any real benefits to anyone. What they didn't say? The Japanese manufacturers have been compelled to relocate all their jobs in the US as a direct consequence of this particular move, which is already underway. Toyota, for example, is expanding operations. In Guanajuato, I don't know if they knew about it. Well, sure you do, my friends who see me from Mexico, but see how all of this is connected because Toyota is expanding operations in Guanajuato because they are taking jobs away from the United States because of Donald Trump's rudeness. As Mexicans, we are winning, and you know who is also winning here in Canada. That is to say, Mexico and Canada, we are winning because there is also a Toyota plant here, and they are expanding operations here in the plant in Canada and in Mexico with the one in Ontario and the one in Guanajuato. Honda also, by the way, I don't know if you know that they are investing in new plants in Querétaro, and they are also going to open a new plant here in Alliston, and now that plant is projected here in Ontario, which is going to grow much more. In Mexico, they are also doing it in Querétaro, and also Nissan, which is another Japanese brand. Nissan, which is another Japanese brand, is taking its production to Thailand and Malaysia. And you know what they are doing? They are closing the door in the face of the United States. Now you want me to leave, I am leaving, because I don't need to be here by force. Do not worry. And the technologies are already falling down in the innovation centers. The American engineers are being left out in the street. You know what they're going to do? I think they can go to harvest the fields, to cherry picking or tomato picking. Those are many vacancies that are being left by the deportations of Trump and the unemployment that it is generating. And here is where the real financial bomb is coming in, my friends, because Japan is not only married. Japan is not only punishing the US by relocating its factories twice, but it is doing so to an even greater extent. You know what it is doing? It is using its most silent but also its most lethal weapon, which is the person I was mentioning a while ago, those government bonds that are kept in the Treasury. The first is a forced exit that is hurting the United States, but the second is a dart to the heart. Currently, Japan stands as the leading overseas entity holding significant amounts of debt from the United States. It is disputed in some circles that it is second. China is undoubtedly still leading in terms of financial power, while Japan is still holding an impressive $1.1 trillion, irrespective of the situation or circumstances involved. That's almost on a par with China, except for China, excluding China, not like China. For many decades, Japan has been a steadfast and trusted partner of the United States of America in their alliance. Japan has been a dedicated ally of the United States for decades, fully supporting Washington due to its perception of China as a rival, while maintaining a close relationship as brothers. My brother, look at February. This year, the Ministry of Defense in Japan, just to show you how things are going, Japan has made the decision to sell Treasury bonds worth a staggering $30 billion. This massive amount will have a significant impact on the fiscal market, my friends. It is currently selling a significant volume of US Treasury bonds in large quantities. It is a dart that has a name and a surname. This would not have been done by Japan if it had not been provoked by Donald Trump. And there is already talk of a consequence that this is going to have on the markets, and above all on the US economy, because it is the most brutal blow ever seen from one of the strongest allies that the US had and to whom it owed the most, because it is no longer willing to continue supporting the debts of a country that does not even thank it. But look, there is something even more strategic behind all this sale, and that is the fact that Japan is already starting to align itself with the tendency of the US to sell off its debts to the United States. Is already starting to align itself with a trend that other countries such as China, Russia, India, Brazil are following. Russia, India, Brazil, and this leads us precisely to the BRICS and BRICS that are making the BRICS, de-dollarizing their economies. And Japan is gradually getting out of the financial system dominated by the dollar and no longer wants to have anything to do with it. Right now in Washington, there should be a genuine panic among friends, taking into consideration what is happening, because the United States owes more than it has, and whoever it owes is already being charged. And once your money one on top of the other, and they don't have the money to pay you, that is the reality. And you know when Japan sells all its treasury bonds, what is going to happen? Given the current scenario, where no one is willing to finance the wars, the bank bailouts, or even the US professional lifestyles, it is indeed baffling how they manage to maintain troops stationed all around the world and sustain their current way of life. This makes one question how they are able to afford and keep up with it all. The multi-billion-dollar expense of having troops all over the place. By using the money printer, we can produce printed bills, but Japan is not alone in this. They have already signed many new trade agreements precisely with the European Union to expand their automotive market. In the eyes of the European Union, Japan is considered a valuable partner, unlike China, which is perceived as an adversary. And that is going to strengthen the euro, and it's going to weaken, of course, the US dollar and accelerate its fall. Just look at the jewel in the Japanese crown. In this move is the solid-state batteries. Toyota has been ahead in this field for years, and all the electric cars are going to these batteries. They possess a significantly increased energy density while also being safer, enduring for a longer duration, and having quicker charging capability in comparison to conventional lithium-ion batteries. This is already being talked about in many technological circles, that what Japan has in this technological development is the future of electric mobility. And Japan has already hinted that if Donald Trump continues as he is going, with his tariffs, they will limit the exports of these batteries to the US, and they can do whatever they want with their Tesla's cars that are going to be unloaded at every corner, and that in the winter they will not start at all. In other words, Japan is warning that if you obstruct us, we will withhold essential components needed by you, severing ties and causing you inconvenience. Without those batteries, what do you think Tesla is going to be? Your cars are going to be a tricycle that's going to pay for itself every 2 blocks. If Ford is going to stagnate, General Motors is going to be forced to buy technology from China. And that inflated prices with Trump's tariffs. That is the supposed Make America Great Again. That's what Donald Trump promised in his campaign. And then the blow is not only for the private sector. It is not something that only Tesla is going to suffer. Japan is one of the largest purchasers of US weapons that Japan buys from the US. From F-35 to Patriot systems to cruise missiles to surveillance drones, everything is bought from the US. Has already increased its military spending to 2% of its gross domestic product, and it's all for Washington and the Pentagon. Japan has the world's third largest defense budget with around 83 characters. The money until this day has exclusively been directed towards US defense contractor Lockheed Martin companies. Raytheon. But if Japan says you know it's over so far, it goes with you, as is already being rumored. A part of that military spending will go to Europe. And that leads to an increase in unemployment numbers for the US defense sector, which basically lives by selling weapons. This is a consequence of Donald Trump's foreign policies that do not measure the cost of what he does. He believes talking is easy, but facing consequences is the real challenge. This leads to a crucial point, the significant disruption. That is precisely this great rupture of alliances that we are already seeing with a fundamental partner of the US, to which it owes more than the favors it does it. That is the reality. Trump says otherwise. But reality is already hitting not only Donald Trump, but the US in the face. Now, what does Donald Trump have to say about all this? What does he think about what Japan is saying? Look at nothing else.
But we have an interesting agreement with Japan that we have to protect them. However, it's not mandatory for them to safeguard us. You're aware that's how the agreement is stated. We have to protect Japan. By the way, not only do they bring economic benefits, but we must also ensure the protection of Japan. But under no circumstances do they have to protect us. I actually ask who makes these deals.
Well, you who else? The last deals with Japan were made by, in his previous presidency, Donald Trump led the administration. It's true what Donald Trump says, that the US protects Japan, but that Japan does not protect the US after we just explained. That the country that Washington owes the most money to is precisely Japan, and Trump comes out and says he does nothing for us. Wait, you live like a rich man and all the money is practically given to you by Japan. Is the one you owe the most, and you come out with that is a manipulative lie from Donald Trump. Look first and let me destroy these arguments of Trump completely, and also reflect a little bit to see what happens with China. First of all, because this security treaty that Donald Trump says is an old treaty that goes back to 1960 years ago. If it is true that they have a treaty that establishes a mutual defense obligation, very different if it is true. Donald Trump says it is asymmetrical, because Japan doesn't have a military. And why Japan does not have an army? Because the US forced it not to have one after dropping 2 atomic bombs on it and occupying it for 7 years. And Trump says it is not that we have to protect them more than they force us because you don't let them have a military. You dropped 2 atomic bombs on them. You are the only country that has dared such brutality that no one else in the world has ever done, and God willing, it will never be done. Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But that does not mean that Japan will do nothing. Look, what Donald Trump doesn't say is that in Japan there are more than 50,000 American troops, including, of course, the Okinawa, Yokozuka, Misawa bases. Now, we have to make this very clear. Those bases are not there to defend Japan in the first place. Their main purpose is to safeguard American interests, exert influence over North Korea, and maintain control over Taiwan if required. And also to harass China, even apart from Russia. That's why they are there, for Japan to come and go. Now, Japan also gives more than $2 billion a year to the United States to support those bases there. In other words, the United States has forced Japan to pay to be occupied. Pay to be invaded? I am of the opinion that Japan is one of the limited number of places where this phenomenon is taking place. Japan has approved in 2015 a reinterpretation of its constitution to be able to exercise collective defense. In order to be able to exercise collective defense, that is to say, now Japan can intervene without an ally like the United States, even though the United States did not want to defend it before it could not even do so. Historically, who has been Japan's biggest aggressor when Donald Trump says, Donald Trump argues that it is our duty to protect Japan. So the question arises, well, just tell me, defend Japan. From whom? If the United States has been the biggest aggressor against Japan, who they have to take care of is you. In 1853, the United States arrives with cannons and warships, well under Commodore Perry, and forces Japan to open up to trade. In 1945, once again, the United States drops 2 atomic bombs on Hiroshima and Nagasaki and murders more than 200,000 people who Japan has to take care of, please. Between the years 1945 and 1952, Japan experienced military occupation by the United States. As a result, they were compelled to draft a constitution which strictly prohibited the formation of a national army and control. The United States foreign policy subjected the nation to intense harm, from whom Japan has to protect itself. The United States has used Japan as an island for its troops. That's the reality from Vietnam. It should be stated that Japan has never attacked the US without provocation. It is worth noting that several movies have been made about the attack on Pearl Harbor, but there has been a notable absence of any major film depicting the attack. But no major movie has been made about why Japan launched the attack on Pearl Harbor. It's not because one day the emperor woke up in a bad mood and said, "Oh, what am I doing? I'm bored out of my mind. Please send kamikazes over there to crash into Pearl Harbor." Hey, emperor, why am I exempted from doing anything at all? Washington had cut off 80% of the oil that Japan was selling. It was not an attack for fun, it was a previous economic warfare. Now, the big question is, after all this context, that I think we cannot summarize it here in so few minutes, but there is much more. How is it that Japan becomes not only one of the great allies of the US, says, okay, they wiped the slate clean, let's close the chapter also, I lend you money and a lot, I will be the country that will lend you the most for your debt. And on top of that, trauma comes out and says, Japan does not do much for us, we contribute more to them. Naturally, the Japanese are offended by this. However, they are still our friends. Insulted, and with good reason, after all the context of what has happened, that I think many Japanese don't even want to remember it anymore. And when they were half over it, the US is the only country that has the cynicism to drop 2 atomic bombs and then make a movie and give itself an Oscar. Do me a favor, no? That's something that the Charos forget. Don't talk about it anymore. Let everybody forget it, because what we did was ominous. And then they make an Oppenheimer movie. They make a movie of Oppenheimer, and they present themselves as the savior heroes for inventing something so monstrous and throwing it at 200,000 civilians, and then they give themselves an award. Of course, that movie was banned in Japan. Japan, because it is an insult to the 200,000 Japanese that every year they commemorate the victims of something so horrendous. What is it called, by the way, when a victim ends up loving his aggressor? That is called the Stockholm Syndrome in psychology. When someone who has been oppressed, abused, violated, begins to love their aggressor. Their aggressor. And that explains why many sectors in Japan today see the US as a protector. So they see the US as a protector. But after this, they say, hey, if that is no longer protecting us, you are destroying us. And the Japanese are already remembering today, and they were not the same ones who dropped 2 atomic bombs on us. Yes, they were. They were not the same ones who imposed a constitution on us, who used our territory as a platform for war, and on top of that, they force us every year to pay them for it. They are not the same ones who forbade us to have an army for decades, who blackmailed us with commercial treaties and sanctioned us, to whom we have lent the most money. And on top of that, their president says,
but we have an interesting agreement with Japan, that we have to protect them. However, it's not mandatory for them to ensure our protection, as that's how the agreement is stipulated.
But that, of course, is the straw that breaks the camel's back for the Japanese. And today they are saying, no more. It's over, as the song says. Thank you very much, by the way, to all of you who are, as always, stay connected and chat with us live. One says, Judith Guerra, you need to study a lot, says Jesus Maria Fonseca. Salud de Mexican family, by the way. I haven't seen La Mera Mera here, walks La Mera Mera Mera. Look, lately there are a lot of things on the channel that you can't see. We are embarking on an exciting venture by launching our Portuguese channel. Moreover, we are thrilled to announce the launch of our English channel as well. Alba, who is part of our small team, is currently juggling multiple new projects. Due to time constraints, we find ourselves on the lookout for more efficient methods. Our team, which includes parents, faces the challenge of arranging school drop-offs and pickups for our children. All right, let's begin. We are not only coming together when we have just a little time to spare, we both gather here while she constantly works behind the scenes and occasionally takes the spotlight in front of the camera. Lastly, a big thank you to all of you who continue to follow and support us. But thank you for telling us, because sometimes you can't see us, but you are always here with a lot of hard work, says Patricia Carmen, I think like you, Mar del Plata, Argentina. Thank you very much. Franco Rojas says greetings to La Bella, Tennessee, and greetings to El Hermoso León. Guanajuato Lucila Fernandez says, with the atomic bombs, the number of victims is endless. The aftermath, people are still dying of cancer. Of course they do. Of course they do, and on top of that, Trump comes out and says that they don't owe him anything and that Japan does nothing for them. It really has no limits. When you see someone like that, you say, hey, what a good heart, Japan, you gave them 2 atomic bombs. They lend you more money than anyone else in the world, where they pay you for sodomizing them. You have your military bases there, and on top of that, you force them to pay you for invading them. You force them to write a constitution. You say you protect them. It is not true. It does not protect them. It is you have bases there. They pay you to have them. It is the only country you have punished like that. And on top of that, you get a lot of money because they lend it to you, and you come out and say that they don't do anything for you, because today Japan is already saying, it's already here. I got to where the pile of Treasury bonds is of what they owe us, sell them. I don't want that anymore. That's too dangerous for another man. In the end, a world that is changing very fast direction and alliances. So if you like to hear about this, subscribe to the channel and see you in the next one.